Thank you all so much for joining us today for this very special occasion. My name is Elizabeth Casillas. I'm the publishing assistant for
Mhm.
Betty, and I'll be your host this evening. And I'm thrilled to welcome you to the launch event for Take Me With You Next Time, the debut title from Betty. Take Me With You Next Time has been years in the making. The 12 stories in this collection explore a wide range of emotions, featuring characters who confront infidelity, addiction, death, and dementia. We're so excited to kick off Betty's journey with this important and necessary book by Janis Hubschman. And for those not familiar with Betty, Betty was founded in 2023 by Peg Alfred Purcell. We're an imprint of WTAW Press dedicated to amplifying women's voices in literature. We're on a mission to publish remarkable works by authors who identify as women, and Take Me With You Next Time marks a significant milestone for us. We couldn't be more thrilled to share this title with you. And joining us today is author Janis Hubschman. She is an incredibly talented storyteller. She has published over 2 dozen short stories in literary magazines such as Cimarron Review, Colorado Review, and Green Mountains Review. Her work has received prestigious awards, including the Tobias Wolff Award and first place recognition from Glimmer Train. In addition to her writing career, Janice is a dedicated educator, teaching fiction writing at Montclair State University. Janice, we're so honored to have you here today. And we
Thank
are
you.
also Great. And we're also joined by a special guest, author Lori Ostlund. Lori is the award-winning author of the story collection, The Bigness of the World, which earned the Flannery O'Connor Award for Short Fiction and the
Mhm.
California Book Award. Her novel, After the Parade, was a New York Times editor's choice and a finalist for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. She is a series editor of the Flannery O'Connor Award for Short Fiction. Her third book, Are You Happy?, will be out in May of next year. We're delighted to have Lori with us as well. And before we dive into the event, I want to remind everyone that we'll be taking questions throughout the event. So please feel free to drop your questions into the Zoom Q&A section as they come to mind. We also have a special giveaway today. Everyone who submits a question will be entered into a drawing to win a signed copy of Take Me With You Next Time. So don't miss out on the chance to ask all your questions. And lastly, be sure to order your copy of this incredible short story collection through our website. You don't want to miss this one. And now, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Janice to read an excerpt from Take Me With You Next Time. Janice, whenever you're ready.
Oh, thank you. First, I want to say thank you to Betty Books, WTAW Press, and Elizabeth, and especially Lori for agreeing to be in conversation with me for this virtual book launch. I'm going to
No,
read to you.
my pleasure. But Janice, I noticed that people can either do galley or speaker, and if people, I just realized that I didn't have mine on speaker. If people
Oh,
want to switch theirs to speaker, it will make sure that you're front and center.
okay. Okay. Ready? I'm going to read to you from the beginning of the last story in the collection called After the Party. As the Woods Hole ferry departs for Martha's Vineyard with a blast of the warning horn, Wendy stands at the rail watching the terminal recede from view. It feels like someone else's life now. All those summers they drove their Jeep, jam-packed with kids and sports gear, onto this ferry. Why had she bothered to book the season's passage and choose an Edgartown rental house when everything has changed? Beside her, Hank keeps his back to the rail, eyeing the other passengers. Women turn their heads. With little effort, he kept his good looks into his early 50s. Gray threads his coarse, dark hair elegantly, and his stomach appears flat under his Eric Clapton t-shirt. After the 5-hour drive from New Jersey, her cotton dress is rumpled and damp with sweat. And although she's as fit as her competition, she's a champion golfer, she's not exactly on her game. You're not going to freak out if I go look for the bar, are you? He says. Don't do that. Don't turn me into the warden. It comes out harsher than she intended. I'll be fine, she tries more lightly. If I get lonely, I'll make new friends. He follows her gaze to the 4 men in golf shirts and khakis, sitting a few yards off in rows of benches. Your clan. Let me help with introductions. Before she can object, he sets off with a swagger meant to amuse her, she's sure, but she has a sick feeling she's about to be humiliated. Serves her right for trying to make him jealous. The men draw Hank into their circle. One gestures with his cup toward the lounge. When Hank gives her the thumbs up, the others turn too. Their scrutiny makes her queasy. A few days ago, she lost her assistant golf pro's position at Red Oaks. She's waiting for the right time to tell Hank. She heads in the other direction. Inside the restroom, the droning engines insulate her from the commotion outside. 1 week on Martha's Vineyard always seemed too short, but now she worries it'll be too long. She dampens a paper towel and reaches inside her collar to swipe her vinegary armpits. What did those golfers see? Her face in the murky mirror seems to peer at her from underwater. Her shoulder-length blonde hair, narrow gray eyes, and whitened teeth glowing. She recognizes the hunted, wild-eyed look she's seen on the older women who come to her, used to come to her, for golf lessons. A last resort in their quest for their husband's attention. She tosses the paper towel into the trash. The boat rolls and she lurches for the door. She checks the gloomy lounge, no sign of Hank, and re-enters the bright, dousing sunlight on the upper deck. Bodies are packed in tight like bowling pins, faces lurid with drink and sunburn. A restless anxiety prickles her skin. The decision to stay with Hank after his affair was easier to make than the one to trust him. She heads towards the stern, scanning the faces. She smiles with relief when she sees him, down on his knees, stroking a black lab. They have 2 golden retrievers and are in negotiations for a third. Dogs need a pack, Hank maintains, and 2 does not a pack make. When she draws closer, she notices the woman, a waif in her 20s with cropped blonde hair, hovering over him. She hesitates. Wendy! Hank stands and flashes his charming smile. This is Maxine. He bends to rub the dog's snout. And Maggie. Another black lab, Wendy tries to modulate the manic brightness in her voice. They're everywhere. Is it a coincidence or a massive lack of imagination? It's because of the Black Dog Tavern in Vineyard Haven, the girl says. The t-shirts, anyways. Of course it is. She touches the girl's silky arm. Youth. Is that what attracts Hank? No doubt he wants to relive every exquisite minute, while Wendy only wants to erase hers. Isn't it weird, though, that such a beautiful place gets associated with the symbol for depression and death? Death? The girl looks at Hank. Don't pay any attention, he tells her. Sometimes a dog is just a dog. You remind me of our daughter, Wendy says. She's about your age. Never knows when I'm joking, right? Hank doesn't answer. He squats to scratch Maggie's glossy head. Who's the pretty dog, he coos. Are you the pretty dog? In the girl's fond smile, Wendy sees his demotion from possible sugar daddy to awesome dad. After the girl walks off, Wendy says, what did I tell you about talking to strange dogs? The cedar shingled house looks large, looming at the end of a deep stretch of emerald lawn. Inside, the deception is revealed. The living room is the size of a foyer. The bedrooms are stunted beneath the barn-styled roof. The kitchen is too small for a table. Last summer's rental house had a long kitchen counter where Olivia and Grace, their 20-something daughters, congregated with magazines, nail polishes, and the salads they carried back from the market in bicycle baskets. She keeps this comparison to herself. Complaining, she senses, would be hazardous, an admission of what exactly? Their crummy judgment and what they lost out on? Hank unloads the car while she stays behind in the kitchen to pack the cooler for the beach. Earlier, they picked up sandwiches, lobster roll for Hank, BLT for her. From the cafe next to the real estate office. Through the dusty window, she watches him pull suitcases from the Jeep, whistling a tune she can't hear. How simple he is, how uncomplicated. Why does she persist in seeing him as someone more calculating? The girl on the ferry meant nothing. The dog tugged harder on his heartstrings. 10 months ago, she came close to losing him. He was flying to the West Coast every weekend, preoccupied with her disappointing amateur golf circuit and with moving Grayson to Manhattan. She didn't question his trips until she overheard Hank's uncle describe the LA project engineer as looking like a Bond girl. Then she noticed how distracted and touchy Hank had grown. When he was packing again in mid-September, she confronted him. She expected evasion, but he seemed relieved to confess. He and Valentina, of course her name is Valentina, had resisted a mutual attraction for months. He told her. Did he expect congratulations? Cancel the trip, she said, or she'd file for a divorce. She was bluffing. She'd never leave him. Later, when she caught him crying in his car, she figured he must have called his lover from the garage to end it because he didn't go to Los Angeles and his involvement in the project ended. She gave him a mulligan. They haven't mentioned Valentina again, though all their conversations seem to be about her. After finding her rival's photo on the company website, a 40-ish Russian beauty, Wendy may have retaliated with a few harmless flirtations, which may partly account for her dismissal from Red Oaks. The golfers from the ferry. Has Hank ever been jealous? In this Cold War period of their marriage, he has all the advantage. He's the only man she's ever loved.
Thank you, Janice, for that beautiful reading. I'd love to now invite Lori to join Janice in a discussion about the book.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. So I don't know whether I'm still figuring out how my gallery is working for gallery versus my speaker. But welcome everybody. And Janice, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you. Janice and I have never actually met in person. This is our first sort of in-person meeting, but happy launch. And I want to thank Janice and Betty Books, Elizabeth Pegg, everyone for inviting me to be part of this celebration. And I want to thank Betty Books for putting good and important books out there. And when did you, how long have you actually been like the stories in this collection? What was the time span kind of in terms of?
The story span, the oldest story in this collection was published 10 years ago.
Okay.
And the newest one I wrote during COVID.
Oh,
So like, yeah, like
oh,
when we're
sure.
all isolated.
I was about to ask you which one, but I should, first of all, thank you everyone who's out there for being here. And I kind of, with my questions, I'm kind of approaching this with the assumption that some people who are here tonight are writers, some are readers, some are both. Some are people who just love Janice and really want to be here, and who may also then be readers and writers. But I told Janice beforehand that I don't want to give any spoilers for those who have not yet read the collection, nor did I want to put her in a position of having to kind of summarize every story before she started to talk about it. I did tell her, she doesn't know the questions. I did tell her that I would be asking more traditional questions, but that I would also have a few surprises along the way. And the surprises are going to come in the form of some speed rounds that I thought we would do just to change the pace a little bit. So every once in a while, you will see that I'm switching into speed round mode, and you'll know to speed up.
Okay.
So we're actually heading into a speed round question now, and that's why I'm letting you know. When I want to kind of, when I first read this collection, I read it first when I wrote the blurb. I'd read some of your work before that, and I love your work, and I love the humor of it. And when I sat down to read this for the blurb and then read it again last week as I was preparing for tonight, I thought It's not a link collection, but I think there's all this pressure kind of to create link collections where a character moves through. But your collection is so cohesive because you have, what I like about it is that you have these premises that are varied, these plot situations and premises that are quite varied and surprising and funny. But moving throughout it are these threads, these through lines that have to do, I think, with maybe your sensibility. And so I thought we would start here and talk about just kind of the themes and the preoccupations and the details that bring that cohesion to it. And one of the themes that I was really interested in, and it pops up a lot, I think, is this idea that how we see ourselves is never how other people see us. And ergo, we can never see other people quite clearly. So at first I thought, I'm going to have Janis talk about her themes, what this book is about. And then I thought, no, I'm going to talk about it. And then I thought, you know what? It's going to be a speed round, and we are going to go back and forth and talk about it together. So I've already given one of the themes that I like about it, this inability to see others clearly. But I'm going to add to it and then pass it off to you that one of the things I really love about it is that you write really well about complicated female friendship, but how complicated it is, yet how necessary it is.
Take it away.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in writing about female friendships. I grew up with sisters and, two sisters, and I have a lot of close women friends. And there's just a level of intimacy with women, like you share things that are like really difficult, and you're not afraid when you have close friends, you're not afraid to look like you can't handle what's going on your life so that you can get the help that you need, and to be vulnerable with other women. And there's a way that you're opening yourself up with other women that you don't do in other
The
relationships.
relationships, yes, because these are women who are dealing with relationships throughout. And one of the other things that I was really interested in is the range that you write about from the point of view of women, young girls, really, teenagers and college students, all the way up to empty nesters. So we get this whole range. So maybe you can say a couple of lines about just the experience of writing about such a range of female.
Yeah, so I guess we're all walking around all the ages we've ever been. And it's not hard to remember like the pain of being heartbroken, like that never leaves you, like your first heartbreak. Um, and in a way, your first heartbreak is a little bit like when your kids leave home because,
Oh,
so,
interesting. So that
yeah,
whole thread of kind of loss and the regret that runs along with it. Well, that's interesting because another thing that I really like about what you do in this book is that sometimes your characters are feeling like they're very bad parents, but sometimes they're feeling like their children are very disappoint, like you come at both of those. Like, I feel so awful as a parent, but also what is going on with my child.
yes. Yeah. So, I think that's just the nature of the job, but that you always feel like you're um, evaluating and reevaluating what you did and second guessing yourself. And just because it's so important, that, if you get it wrong, it's like really matters. Um, so on one day you could feel like, I'm pretty good at this. And the next day you could feel like, oh, my kid's going to need like multiple people to help them later on. So it's up and down all the time. Um, I mistrust anyone who feels confident all the time. Like I feel like
Yeah.
nobody can be that.
Well, I love that because I think that's what makes the work so rich. And I'm thinking both about the fact that your main characters are often incredibly flawed, which makes me like them even more. And but it also makes me think of something that I think Charles Baxter wrote, that our job is kind of to let our characters get into good trouble or
Yes.
interesting trouble or
Yes.
something along those lines, which
Yes.
you're very good at doing, letting your characters do that.
I love Charles Baxter, and I love especially what he had to say about writing. And I really took that heart to heart. I've read that him when he wrote that, and to see what kind of trouble your characters can get into. Like if they're not in trouble, like put them in trouble.
Yeah.
'Cause then you find out who they are because they're up against the wall and they have to make some kind of decision or maybe not do anything and just be inert, and then you learn something about them
Right,
even then.
right. So I'm going to kind of toss it back to you now to actually, I love those answers. And I know that I was just coming at you, but is there anything that you would add in terms of it's also about this? Because I think there's the humor of it. There are all of these. I have a whole list of things that I thought about, but I'm curious what you would add now to say, like, for you, the book is really about this.
Oh, I think it's just the resiliency of well, I'm going to say women because mostly women characters. So I would just say the resiliency of women, that our ability to bounce back and go through a tough time and come out of it, a little beaten up, but also like ready for the next fight because we've got some more information and we've got some more confidence in ourselves to get through something. And I think that comes through all the stories. Like the characters are really being put through the what is it, the mill? They're being put through something.
The ringer,
I can't
Nate.
think of,
The
yeah, the
mill and
ringer.
the
Okay.
ringer, both.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And they're really being beat up. But my feeling when I'm writing about them is they're gonna make it. They're gonna figure this out. And even if they don't come out like, smelling too pretty, they the next time they're up against something similar, they're gonna have some tools. They're gonna have some information.
Right. I want to stick with this idea for a moment, and I'm hoping I'm not going to be this is not asking the same question. I don't think it is, because right now we've been talking about kind of the bigger picture of what it is that when you step back from your work, what it's about. But I was thinking about, or I think a lot about where ideas come from. And I think that both writers and non-writers alike, you probably had this experience where a friend who doesn't write will say to you, like, where did this even come from? But I think that ideas are interesting. And I think we know that feeling of sitting down with a blank page
Mm.
and writing something and feeling almost in awe of the fact that that happened. Like, where did this idea? And I think people are fascinated by where ideas come from. I think of have the best American short stories. Every year they have a section at the back. How did this story start? Where did
Mhm.
these ideas come from? So I just want to throw that to you as kind of a big question, however you want to run with it. But how do you think about your creative process? Where do your ideas come from?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stories, I don't say they all started the same way, but a lot of the stories started with, I think of a character with a problem, like something, it's like a what if. And I tried to like think about like, what if I had this problem? Like, how would I get out of this? Like I'm a reference point for it. But then after, I start writing, I leave myself behind and I'm totally immersed in the world and in this person I invented. But what if I had this problem?
Right. And do the characters generally solve the problem in ways that you would not? Do you find yourself like actively pushing them away from what you might be comfortable with?
Yeah, because they become their own character. They become, I'm not I'm not that interesting. So I mean, like my characters are more interesting because I can manipulate them, and so I'm more interested in their how they can handle it with what the tools they have. So I put them in a situation. This is the character. This is the problem. This is their backstory.
Yeah.
Now let's see how they get out of this mess.
Well, one of the things that I'd kind of written down, and I realized it wasn't a question, but it was just something I noticed about your work, which is what you're talking about right now. And that's your ability to kind of get into those fissures that exist for your character and find a way to blow them up, to show us what the fissures are and blow them up. And sometimes they come in the form of, I was thinking, oh, there's something very Halloweenish here because there's so much haunting of people who show up from the past or
Hmm.
past versions of the character that suddenly start to feel relevant to them. Like when I was this age, I was doing this, or why did I give this up? Or just decisions that they made that sudden and often kind of the other direction that you go that I really find interesting has to do with their spouses and the things
Hmm.
that spouses do, either inadvertently, like getting ill, or maybe more actively.
Yeah, I love layering things over. So the character has a background. Sometimes that background just kind of like wiggles its way into the present scene. So either like a old lover, they're meeting an old lover, or they're just realizing this situation I'm in is so reminiscent of something I went through in the past. And now I'm dealing with it on two different levels. So I love that layering in because, I mean, in life, I feel like that happens a lot where you're sitting and having a conversation with them and you have a sense of deja vu and you realize, yeah. So it's like, I feel like we're living, like I said earlier about we contain all our ages. I feel like we also contain all our moments. So they're resonating and we're feeling them and we're trying to have a normal conversation with someone, but we're remembering something from when we were 17.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah, you're very good at those layers of understanding that at any given moment, as someone is thinking about this, doing this, and feeling this. Um, I want to come back to this a little bit later, this kind of idea we're talking about, but I know I have been told that there are a lot of New Jersey people in the room, and I happen to know this also. So I'm in San Francisco. Janis is in New Jersey, and I am going to just switch to the New Jersey part of the evening. So, and Janis, I'm just going to warn you that some of these questions were influenced by my wife, who grew up, as you know,
Okay.
down the street from you. Um, but we're going to switch into another speed round and then kind of open it up to a longer question. So in your bio, you talk about the fact that you grew up in New Jersey and you live in New Jersey today. And many of these stories are set in New Jersey. So first, the speed round. There are 4 parts here. Part 1, Bruce Springsteen or Patti Smith?
Patti Smith.
Okay. Number 2, William Carlos Williams or Allen Ginsberg?
Oh, William Carlos Williams.
Oh, interesting. Number 3, Holland Tunnel or Lincoln Tunnel?
Lincoln Tunnel. Lincoln Tunnel.
Okay, I'm going to find out whether that's the correct answer later. Number 4, Jersey or New Jersey?
New Jersey.
I thought so. Yeah, I can see somebody nodding in the background also. Who is this? Marianne Villanueva is nodding. She's like, yes, that's the correct answer. I don't know why, but I saw her nodding. She was like, yes. Um, so from here, I kind of want to go into this bigger question of maybe how the place we live, where we grow up, shapes us. And I'm going to preface it by saying that I grew up in Minnesota, small town Minnesota. When my first book came out, a reviewer called me a Minnesota writer, which I did not know. It sounds silly now, but I did not know that. And then a friend immediately wrote to me and said, reading your book was like a handbook in how to be a Minnesotan. So, and now it feels silly and I fully embrace it. I think I'm a Minnesota writer and I know how to talk about that. But I'm wondering for you, whether you think of yourself as a New Jersey writer, and if so, what that means. How does being from New Jersey, or what does it mean to be a New Jersey, and how does that make its way into your book?
Yeah, I think I've become comfortable with the fact that I'm from New Jersey. I mean, New Jersey is a joke to a lot of people. Like, on Saturday Night Live for a while, they had this skit where people said they were from New Jersey, and they said, "What exit?" And and then people mentioned Sopranos, and and the New Jersey Turnpike, which is not a pleasant place, but I've come to like embrace New Jersey and my part in it. I think because I'm comfortable with myself now, I'm comfortable with the state where I
Mhm.
came from. And I think there's a lot to it. We're close to the city, to the city, we call it the city, but it's Manhattan, close to Manhattan. It's just like a half hour away. Or you could be at the beach. Um, there's lots of woods and open fields, but there's also, little cities that you could go to, smaller cities. So I feel like it gives me a lot of room to write about different things because it's not. I think you can't really define it very easily, or
Yeah.
people don't. Yeah, unless your character, it's a unless you're making fun of it, then I think, and turning it into a cliche, um, where Sopranos and the New Jersey Turnpike are at the forefront. But I think there's so much to it that it's impossible to, nail it.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking in two directions now because one is I'm curious about humor in your work and whether, as I'm listening to you talk about New Jersey, I'm thinking about the humor in your work. But I'm also thinking about, at least for me, I always feel like I have to know the stereotypes that people have of a place and then not reject them as being false, but in some way upend them or write against them. And I feel like I'm hearing parts of that in what you're saying also.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can appreciate, like, I can laugh at that. Like, I mean, I think part of being able to write is being able to laugh at yourself a little bit too, and at life, and difficult things. But I think that's also about the state. Like, I feel like New Jersey, I can laugh at it, but it's also my home.
Right. Yeah. Well, I
And
also seeing right above your head is my friend Valerie Stoller, who's also from that exact same area that you're talking about. So, um, this is going to be a disappointment for people, but I'm now switching away from New Jersey. Well, for some people, that's going to be a relief. For others, it's going to be a disappointment. Um, but one of the things, so one of my favorite, I want to talk about a specific story, maybe. I said I wouldn't, but um, one of my favorite stories is Creature Comforts. And when I was thinking about why I love this story so much, I thought, is it because it captures that feeling of being a teacher so well, like being in a classroom? But I think that it's more than that. I think it has to do with the ending also. And I think that as teachers, there's this feeling we always have that we don't want to be we want to be vulnerable in the classroom, but maybe not too much. And what that means is leaving our own lives outside the door. And it's all about the students. And in this story, you kind of go directly into, you said you put your characters in these awful situations. In that story, you do it so well because you bring the woman's husband who's falling apart into the classroom. And so she becomes incredibly vulnerable. But I think that's what works so well in the story. So I'm kind of backing into my question here because I spend a lot of time thinking about endings, and I love the ending of that story. And I think all teachers, I'm sure you get asked this by your students, why don't we read more stuff with happy endings? And maybe because right now at this, we feel like we want things to feel happier or lighter or whatever. But I'm wondering how you feel about the whole idea of happy endings. And I'm just going to say up front that when I say I'm using happy ending, it's just kind of, a shortcut. I want you to really define that to your own liking, but to maybe talk about how you think about the idea of endings and happy endings. And because in that story, there's so much compassion. And I think what you do at the end is show the way that people connect in unlikely moments. So I'm wondering if you could maybe just talk about that more generally in terms of endings.
Yeah, I think more than happy endings, I like to write hopeful endings. So although, the end of the story, people aren't getting what they want, or they're not resolving their problems, but they see a way out, like they see some kind of hope. And at the end of that particular story, um, the teacher thinks something that I often think, oh, there's another class. I can teach this again and get it, and like get it across to the students. And so I think that's what happens at the end of that story. Like she's glad there's more classes in the semester for her. And also there's a deepening of the connection between her and her students. So she's looking ahead to something like a more meaningful conversations in the classroom
Yeah.
after this, and probably having her husband appear in the class, in that disheveled state was probably the worst thing she could imagine. And now it's happened, and now she can move on.
That's interesting because that part of it, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that is the moment where everything kind of shifts and it is the worst. And yeah, that was a great answer. I'm looking at the time and I'm realizing I have more questions. I'm just going to let you know I have more questions, but I have a feeling that people out there also have questions. So before I kind of turn it back to Liz, I'm just going to ask the final speed round question. Mail-in ballot or vote in person?
Vote in person.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to show your book one more time. I don't know if but I know that we're going to come back to this. And if I do have more questions, I'm happy to ask questions, but I do want to turn it over to other people to ask questions. And I want to thank you, Janice, for
Oh, thank you. Those are great
Thank
questions. I
you.
love them.
Yeah. No, that
Really.
your answers were great. I had to ask you about that story because I love all the stories, but that story, every time I read it, there's something
Oh,
about it's very um it constantly surprised me, which is what I find I really always like as a reader.
oh,
It's like,
thank
oh, I did
you.
not know that was going to happen.
Oh,
So,
thank you. Thank you. I love those questions, though. They really made me think about the stories again. Thank you.
oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you both for that engaging conversation. Now we're going to move into the audience Q&A part of the evening. I see we have some great questions already coming in, so let's get started. The first question is from Stacy. Which story was hardest for you to write and figure out?
Oh, to figure out, like, so from a technical standpoint, I guess, or is it harder emotionally? That I guess um, harder to write to figure out, I guess, would be Wild Quaker Parrot, because I had some realism in there, but also some magical realism, where the parrot may or may not be the reincarnated boyfriend. And so I had to figure out how to work that in so it seemed like um, the protagonist was entertaining the idea that it might be a possibility, and I had to make the reader believe in it too. And then I was also folding in the past with the present and alternating between those, so that was something I had to handle.
Thank you. And from Rick, what motivates you to begin a story? A thought, an impression from your day, or something else?
Ah, it's different. I think it's different each time, but a lot of times it's a character with a problem, and I'm thinking about that character and how they're going to handle the problem, and saying, what if this happens? What if that happens? And I walk around thinking about it for a week or two, and then I have to sit down and write it.
Perfect. I'm from Colleen. Janice, you're a rock star. How did you choose what to read tonight? Is that excerpt particularly representative of your work?
Ah, thank you. That's very nice of you. I wanted to read the last story in the book. It's sort of like things are ending in the story, and the character is setting off on a ferry to a new destination, but she's at the end of her life, so it holds a lot of tensions and uh, also she's hoping for a better outcome, a better future for her and her husband. So I wanted to read something that people might wonder how it ends up.
Great, thank you. And from Marianne, how did you select which story would close the collection?
Ah, that story. Okay, the same story. So that story, yeah, the same for the same reasons. It's about a lot of endings, the end of a relationship, the trust in the relationship. It's the end of visiting Martha's Vineyard with their children, the family vacations. It's the end of her golf career. And so I thought it was a suitable last story for the book. Um, Endings made sense.
Yes, yes. And from Jerry, Janice, I've observed that, especially in short stories, authors hear voice first or story first, then trying to come up with some way to connect them. What is your process?
Hmm. I think it's voice, the character's voice. I know who the character is when I'm starting, or I have a pretty good idea of who the character is. I discover a lot more as I'm writing, but I can hear them and see them when I sit down to write the first page, and I've got a pretty good idea of who they are.
Perfect. And from Jolene, you read from a very engaging story about a woman struggling to reconcile herself to her ongoing life with an unfaithful man. Have any writers in particular influenced your writing about romantic relationships?
I love reading Tessa Hadley. Yeah, she writes a lot about like long marriages and relationships, and I feel like she really gets into the texture and the layers of the understanding or misunderstanding between two people, and I'm fascinated by that.
Thank you. And from Tony, how was your process about selecting the order of the collection?
Ah, okay. Um, I wanted to put the stories I have. So I have different age protagonists. So I wanted to put the stories of the young protagonist, the girl who's into college. So she's in the summer between high school and college, and the college student who leaves school. I put those in proximity to each other, and then two stories that are linked. They share characters. I put those stories together, and then I just wanted to see. I looked at the stories and saw if I had first person narrators or second or third person narrate perspective, and I wanted to make sure that book didn't feel too claustrophobic with too many first person narrator stories coming back to back. And I just wanted to have the reader have a feeling of each time a new story started, they were entering something brand new.
Mhm. And from Denise, your stories are so refined. How do you approach revision?
Revision is my favorite thing. So if I had my way, I'd be revising a story for years and years, but eventually I have to have it pried out of my hands. But I love the revision process because I'm really discovering the story and the characters at that point. I have a process of writing where I allow myself in the first draft to have no censor. I just write everything I that comes to my mind, and then the revision process is so pleasurable because I have so much material to work with, and I can start shaping it and being selective about motif or details or scenes. So that's I really feel like that's where the real art of it comes in the revision process.
Perfect. And from Anne, how do your teaching and your students influence your writing?
Oh, a lot. So I feel like I write better when I'm teaching. So I because I get the opportunity to talk to students who are new to the writing techniques, and I'm explaining them to them. I'm breaking them down. I'm selecting stories that show them how it's working well in the story. And then I watch them trying to replicate that in their own stories. And it's so I feel myself while I'm teaching, even thinking about my own writing at that time, because I'm thinking, oh, I see this is something I need to be doing in my own stories. And I see my students struggling with it, and I'm trying to help them through the process. And um, it's just being immersed in the whole process and world of writing and literature that makes me feel like I'm just swimming in it. So it's yeah, it just feels like we're all swimming together, and it's a a really good feeling.
Beautiful. And from Leah, I love that comment about using POV to inform the order of the collection. Do you often switch POVs during revision, or do you find your first choice tends to stick?
My first choice tends to stick. I have done that. I have changed point of view when the story's not working. Like maybe I need to get closer to the character and I'll switch to a first person, or maybe I need a more distance and I'll switch to third. But that's rare. Usually, like I said, when I come to a story, I hear the voice, and usually it has a point of view too. It's either I hear the voice like speaking directly, or I hear it like at a distance. So yeah, usually that's established in the beginning.
Perfect. And I have just a few more questions for you. Your stories showcase smart, resilient women who persevere despite difficult emotions and situations. What message do you hope readers take away from their journeys?
Huh. Maybe more than a message is a feeling, like a feeling of strength, like reading the stories and feeling like you become invested in this person's problem. You care about it, and then you worry about them and watch them like actually uh, come through the other side. And so you walk away with a feeling, I hope, of that that life can be difficult, but it it's still it gives you gifts. It gives you gifts. Like difficulties can be something that helps you figure out how to get through your life.
Thank you. And the characters in Take Me With You Next Time face varying crises like infidelity, addiction, and grief. What drew you to these particular struggles, and how did you approach writing characters who are so deeply impacted by these events?
I think these are pretty common problems. I think about Tolstoy's remark that all all happy families are alike and unhappy families are, I'm murdering the quote, but all unhappy families are unique. They have their own special problems. So I feel like these problems are common to a lot of people. Everybody probably knows somebody who's gone through these problems, but to show them in a particular family, show how a particular family is dealing with them, uh, is, I think that's why people go to read books or read fiction, to learn how other people are handling everything.
Thank you. And reviewers have praised your precise, detailed writing. Could you talk about your process for honing each sentence and ensuring that the language serves both the narrative and emotional depth of your stories?
Uh, so I think that all comes in the revision process, right? After I've got the big stuff on the page, the big feelings and the big emotions, I can go and look at sentences and this is fun. Like, so I look at like words that just aren't doing their jobs, and flabby sentences or vague words, and just searching for something that could you know be more precise or more resonant with what I'm trying to do. So, I mean, I think that's a lot of fun.
Thank you. And last question for the evening. What has been the most rewarding part of seeing Take Me With You Next Time come to life as a complete book?
Well, that readers that people are reading my stories and telling me how they impacted them, how they felt reading them, and unexpected reactions. Because I feel a certain way about the stories, and because I wrote them. But when other people come to me and tell me how they felt reading one or the other stories in my book, and because they have their own unique experiences and point of view, and I feel like that's such a amazing thing that I'm reaching people in different ways.
Perfect. Thank you. And that wraps up our event this evening. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us, and a huge thank you to Janis Hubschman and Lori Ostlund for being part of this wonderful event. For the winners of the giveaway, I'll be in touch tomorrow via email. And we encourage you all to pick up a copy of Take Me With You Next Time. It's available now. And thank you again. We hope to see you at our future events. Make sure to follow Betty on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky to keep up with everything going on, and sign up for our newsletter via our website. Have a great rest of your day.